Hello, good evening, everyone. Vanisha, Ritika, and Labiba.
Good evening, sir.
Okay. All right. So, everyone, in today's class, we'll be talking about the setting off of the GST. Just a minute. Give me a moment. All right. So, well, first of all, try to understand what is the meaning of setting off the GST. I want all of you to note this down. Setting off GST. So setting off GST basically means setting of the input GST against the output GST. Just a second, let me write that down. Okay, so setting off means adjusting the tax paid at the time of purchase, that is input GST, with the output GST. Okay, so adjusting the taxes paid in such a way that we completely adjust it with the output GST that we have collected on the time at the time of sale. And there is a particular procedure which we need to follow in order to adjust the tax that we had paid at the time of purchase with the tax collected at the time of sale. So we need to basically follow these steps in order to set off the GST. So I'm writing down these steps. We'll be able to understand the concept of setting off through question only. But let me just write this down. And once we are done with the theoretical aspect of this topic, we'll start doing the questions as well. All right. So these are the various steps that we that we follow to adjust the GST. Number one, first of all, we try to adjust the input IGST. The first step in the adjustment or setting of the GST is setting of the input IGST. That means the IGST that we have paid or at the time of purchase. We'll first of all try to set off that IGST with the output IGST that we have collected on sale. And if you are able to adjust the input IGST with the output IGST, then it is fair enough. But if there is some balance which is not yet set off even after the even with the balance of the output GST, then such balance will be set off with the outputs CGST and SGST as well. Okay, now let me explain this. First of all, let's suppose amount of input IGST was, you know the meaning of the input IGST, right? The text we have paid at the time of purchase, GST at the time of purchase. We paid this, let's suppose we paid input IGST of 50,000. Okay. And then we collected output IGST of, let's suppose, 40,000. We collected output CGST as well at the rate, let's suppose this is 5,000, and we also collected output CGST, output SGST at the rate of, just a second, let me change the values. Let's suppose this is 60,000 and 10,000 and 20,000. We'll just first of all talk about the adjustment or the setting of the IGST only. And let's suppose this is situation number one, case one. Let's also presume a case two, wherein the amount of input GST is same, 50,000, but the IGST that we had collected is only 30,000. And then we have 20,000. And this is 20,000 as well. Case number three, let's presume the IGST that we paid is 50,000. We collected 20,000. Okay. And we have, let's suppose, 25,000 and 15,000. Okay. Now let's talk about this case number one only. Let's try to understand how we will be able to set off the IGST. So see, the first thing, you don't have to note this down, just try to understand. See, input IGST we have paid is 50,000, right? And what are the output IGST, CGST and SGST we have available? See, output IGST, then output CGST and output SGST for case one. I'm talking about case one only. So output IGST we have is 60,000. Output CGST is 10,000. And output SGST is also 20,000. Now, out of this, we will first of all try to set off the IGST from the input IGST with the output IGST only. So we'll write setting off input IGST with output IGST. Is that right? And how much we'll be able to set up? We have input IGST is 50,000. Do we have sufficient amount of balance to set off 50,000? Do we have sufficient amount of output IGST available to set off the input IGST? Answer is yes. We have output GST available 60,000. That means we have collected 60,000 and we paid 50,000. Okay. So that means you'll be completely able to set off the output input IGST with the output IGST, and remaining balance will be 10,000 negative 10,000 and then 20,000. There will be no requirement to adjust any amount with the output CGST and output SGST. We'll completely be able to adjust the entire amount with the output IGST only. Is that correct? So this is case one. In this situation, we are able to adjust the entire amount with the IGST, output IGST only. Got it? Is this clear, everyone? Case one
Yes,
is clear.
sir.
Okay. Now let's talk about case number two. For case two, let me quickly take the values. Okay. So for case two, input IGST was 50,000, but output IGST was 30,000. We collected 30,000 as IGST, we collected 20,000 as CGST, and we collected 20,000 as well for the SGST. Now, first of all, when we have to set off the input IGST, we'll first of all adjust the input IGST with the output IGST. So how much IGST we have paid this time? In case two, we paid 50,000. And if you, okay, all these values will be in negative. These are all debit, indicating the debit balances. This is debit balance. Now 50,000 we have. 50,000 we had paid at the time of purchase. We'll try to first of all adjust the entire amount with the output IGST. But as you can see, we don't have sufficient amount of balance available to completely set off the output GST with the input GST. Right? Because how much we have basically only 30,000 available, but we paid actually 50,000. So there is a deficit of 20,000, right? Now we'll calculate the balance. It will be 20,000 credit balance and 20,000 debit balance, 20,000 debit balance under the SGST as well. Now the remaining amount, which we are not able to set off with the output IGST, will now set off the remaining amount with the setting off remaining input balance, remaining input IGST with, tell me, with CGST and SGST, right? Input CGST and SGST. So we will be subtracting the amount of IGST, input IGST with the output CGST, and then we will be able to completely set off the IGST. In that case, there will be nil balance, right? And we will have a nil balance under the output CGST as well, but we will have a credit balance under the output CGST to that. Got it? Is that clear? Is that clear, everyone? This is how we will set off the IGST in second case. Tell me if this is clear or not.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Now, after this, we need to pass the journal entry as well, but we'll talk about the journal entry later. But first of all, try to understand how do we actually set off the IGST. Okay, now talking about the case 3, let me erase all these. Okay, so in case 3, the balances were output IGST was 20,000, 25,000, and 15,000. But again, in this situation as well, our input IGST that we paid at the time of purchase is in excess of the output IGST that we have collected. We only collected 20,000, but we have paid 50,000 at the time of the purchase of goods. All right. All these are the debit balance. So that means we won't be able to completely set off the input GST with the output GST that we have collected. We will be having credit balance of the input GST 30,000, right? And all of the balances will be 25,000 and 15,000. This is debit balance, which is in bracket indicating debit balance, and outer bracket without bracket is the credit balance. So that means we are yet to set off the 30,000 with the CGST and HGST. All right, so now we'll try to set off this 30,000. We won't be able to set off this in any amount from the output IGST because we don't have any amount under the output IGST, but we still have the 25,000, 15,000 available under the output CGST. So we'll first of all try to adjust this amount to the extent of output CGST balance available, that is 25,000 out of the output CGST, and balance value will be adjusted with the output SGST. Now get the nil balance here, we'll get the nil balance here, but we'll get the debit balance of 10,000 under the output SGST. This is the debit balance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now see, this is how we pass. This is how we usually set off. And this kind of set off is required when the balance of the input IGST is more than the balance of the output GST. Remember, listen to me very carefully. When the input IGST is more than the output GST, then such treatment is done. But then there is a different scenario. When the output GST is more than the input GST, then the treatment will be little different. We'll talk about that. But let me first of all discuss few questions based on the, at least let's discuss one question based on this concept wherein the input IGST is higher than the output IGST. Got it? So for that purpose, we'll quickly discuss a question. Just a moment. Let me just open the PDF that Vanisha had shared with me. Just a moment. We won't be talking about the journal entry now. I'll try to discuss the journal entry through this question. Okay, so I want all of you to take this screenshot of the illustration number 10. I hope this is clear, everyone. Now see, what does this question say? It says, home store has following balances in its GST account. Input GST that this store has paid is 6,50,000 by way of IGST, 3 lakh by way of CGST, and 3 lakh as the SGST as well. And various GST that this store have collected is 5,25,000, 2 lakh, and 2 lakh. IGST, CGST, and SGST respectively. Question says, show how input GST will be adjusted against the output GST and which account will have the balance. Okay. Basically, question is asking you to determine which account will have the balance. That means whether you will have the balance under the IGST account or the CGST account or SGST account. And after doing the set off, you need to pass the journal entry to show the set off as well. Okay. So let me show you how we will be presenting this. Particulars, amount of IGST, amount of CGST, and amount of SGST. So first of all, the first thing that we will always write in this format is the output CGST that we have collected. Output GST that we have collected. So output GST that we have collected is always indicate the debit balance. All right. And need to be, no, in fact, I'm really sorry. Output GST always indicate the credit balance, because output GST is a collection of text, and collection is always credited. So it always has a credit balance and indicated in the bracket 5,25,000, 2 lakh, and 2 lakh. This is the total value that we have collected by way of IGST, CGST, and HGST. Now we'll set off, first of all, out of this, we'll set off the input GST that we had paid. Setting off input IGST. All right. So we'll first of all subtract the amount of input IGST, which was, let me check. Okay, so input IGST was 6,50,000. Okay, now as you can see, the output GST that we collected is 5,25,000 only, but the input GST that we paid was 6,50,000. That clearly means that we won't be able to set off the entire amount. We won't be able to set off the entire input GST with the output GST. Got it? Now we'll calculate the balance. Balancing figure will be, after subtracting 5,25,000 out of 6,50,000, the remaining amount will be 1,25,000. This is yet to be set off. And under IGST, we will have a credit balance of 2 lakh that can be utilized to set off the IGST. And we will also have 2 lakh under the SGST as well. Okay. Now the balance value will be set off through the CGST, output CGST. Okay. So less input or set off input IGST with output CGST or SGST, depending upon whether we will be able to set off with the CGST or not. Okay, so now we'll set off 1,25,000 out of 2 lakh, and yeah, and we will be able to set off this entire amount. After setting off, entire amount will be set off. There will be nothing left under the IGST. We don't have to set off any amount from the SGST. And now we'll calculate the balance. Balancing value will be There will be nil balance under the IGST, output IGST. But under the CGST, we will have a credit balance of, 75,000 credit balance and 2 lakh credit balance under the SGST. The credit balance always indicate that we will be receiving this amount from the government. All right. Okay. After that, since IGST has been adjusted, has been set off, now we will have to set off the input CGST with the output CGST as well, as you must have written this step, right? The first step, we are done with the first step. We have adjusted we have set off the IGST with the input IGST with the output IGST. Now we'll talk about the setting of the input CGST with the output CGST. So now let's set off input CGST with output CGST. So input CGST, as per the question, input CGST was how much? Input CGST was 2 lakh. No, input CGST was 3 lakh. So when you will try to subtract 3 lakh out of the remaining balance, you won't be able to subtract the entire amount. And okay, so after doing this, you will have the balancing figure. Balance under the input CGS, output CGST will be 2,25,000. Okay, positive balance, and 75,000 minus 3 lakh will be 2,25,000, and we will also set off. Okay, let it be 2 lakh. Now we'll do one more step. Now we'll try to set off the less set off input SGST against output SGST. Right, so output SGST was how much? It was also there in the question. Output SGST, input SGST was 3 lakh as well. So now this is the balancing value. Balance we will have 2,25,000 and 3 lakh, 2 lakh minus 3 lakh will be 1 lakh. So since we are getting the positive values, so that means we will be receiving this much from the government. This is the this indicate amount that we will receive. This is receivable. If you are getting the positive value, that indicates receivable value, and if you are getting the negative value, that indicates the amount payable to the government. I hope this is clear, everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is how we set off the various GSTs. Now we will have to pass the entries as well. So in order to pass the journal entry, what we'll do, we'll try to focus upon the step that we followed while setting off. The first thing that we did was we set off the input GST with the output GST to the extent of 5,25,000 only, right? Because input IGST was 650,000, but we had 5,25,000 only available only under the output IGST. So we were able to set off 5 to the extent of 5,25,000 only. So the journal entry for this will be, we'll pass the journal entry now. The journal entry for the first step that we did, output IGST has been utilized to the extent of 5,25,000, right? To set off the input IGST. So the entry will be output IGST account debited by 5,25,000 to input IGST account 5,25,000. Okay, and you can write down the narration on your own. I believe that we are adjusting input IGST with the output IGST to the extent of 5,25,000 only. Then because the input IGST is not fully set off with the output CGST, then we further adjusted the input GST with the output CGST as well, right? We had adjusted the input IGST with the output CGST as well to the extent of 1,25,000. Is that correct? So the entry for this will be output CGST account has been utilized to the extent of 1,25,000 to set off the input IGST account 1,25,000. This means that we had adjusted the balancing value of input IGST with the output CGST account. You can write down the narration on your own that balance input IGST is being adjusted with the output CGST to the extent of 1,25,000. Next adjustment we did is in the next step we adjusted the CGST input CGST with the output CGST to the extent of 75,000 only, right? To the extent of 75,000 only. So the entry for this will be output CGST account has been utilized to the extent of 75,000 to set off the input CGST account by 75,000. Right? Is that clear, everyone? And one last entry, one last thing that we did, we finally adjusted the input SGST through the output SGST to the extent of 2 lakh. All right, so the entry for this will be output SGST has been utilized to set off the input SGST to the extent of 2 lakhs only. This is what we did in the first question. This is how we'll pass the entries. I hope this is clear, everyone. Kindly confirm if this is clear or not.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Well done. Okay, so this was a case wherein the amount of input IGST is higher than the output IGST. So in this situation, this is how we will pass we will set off the amount of input IGST and also pass, this is how we pass the journal entries. Now we'll quickly discuss one more question wherein the amount of input IGST is less than the output IGST. Okay. Just a moment, let me just scroll this down. So let me just amount of input GST is 8,50,000 and output GST is okay. Yeah, this is a question wherein you can see the amount of input IGST is 8,50,000, right? We paid 8,50,000 at the time of purchase and output GST is 5,75,000. So this question is very much similar to the previous question, which I believe that you will be able to do on your own, right, everyone? Because this time as well, input IGST is greater than the output GST. So this is very much similar to the previous case. I think you can do it on your own. Shall we move to the next question, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about illustration number 12. Here, let's look at the values. Input GST that we paid is 2,50,000. But the output GST that we collected is 3,25,000. Yeah, so in this case, input GST is less than the output GST. So let's quickly discuss this question. I want you to take the screenshot of the question. Those of you who don't have the question with you, you can take the screenshot quickly. All right, now let me explain this. Output GST we collected by way of IGST, CGST, and SGST, amounting to 3,25,000, 2 lakh, and 2 lakh. All of these indicate the credit balance. Now, we'll first of all try to set off input IGST against output IGST, right? So amount of input IGST which is given in the input IGST given in the question is 2,50,000. So if you want to adjust input IGST with output IGST, you'll see that the input IGST is much less than the output GST. That means we will completely be able to set off the entire amount of input IGST with the output IGST that we have collected. And even after subtracting this, we will have a credit balance that will be left. Okay, 75,000. And under output CGST will be 2 lakh and 2 lakh as well. Balance. Then now we'll set off less or set off input CGST, right, against first of all with the output CGST, output CGST. So amount of input CGST was how much? It was given in the question. Let me check. Okay. So input CGST is 3 lakh and output CGST that we have collected is only 2 lakh. That means we won't be able to completely set off the input CGST with the output CGST. Anyway, so let me first of all write down the value. We need to set off how much? 3 lakh out of the output CGST. but we won't be able to set off the entire amount. Even after setting off the 3 lakh out of 2 lakh, there will be a balancing figure of 1 lakh that will be left. Right? We have got the balancing figure under the input CGST 1 lakh, which is yet to be, because we have how much output CGST available? We have is only 2 lakh, and the input CGST that we paid is 3 lakh. So that means we will have to further adjust 1 lakh rupees. And this 1 lakh now will be adjusted with the IGST that is available, output IGST that is available after setting off the input IGST. This amount will be adjusted with the balancing figure. Okay, so let me show you how we'll do that. First of all, let me write down the balancing figures, balancing values. Subtracting plus or set off input CGST against remaining output IGST. All right, so we'll subtract 75,000 from here and 75,000. We won't be able to adjust the entire amount from 75,000 because we don't have sufficient amount of balance available under the IGST as well. And here we will get the nil balance. We will get the 25,000 debit balance, positive value, and just a minute. Yeah, 2 lakh credit balance. All right. This is all about the setting off of the CGST. Now let's talk about the SGST. Now let's set off input SGST against output SGST that we collected. So we paid input GST of how much? We paid input GST of 3 lakh. We'll try to subtract 3 lakh out of the credit balance of 2 lakh, but we won't be able to completely set off. Right? And that is why we will get the positive balance of 1 lakh under the output SGST debit balance and 25,000 debit balance under the output CGST as well, debit balance. That means this is receivable, and we have got the positive balance under the output SGST as well. So this also indicate receivable amount. Got it? Everyone, is this clear? This is how. Now, how it is different from the previous question? This is different from the previous question in a way that this time IGST, balancing value of the output IGST, is being utilized to set off the balancing value of the input CGST. So when the IGST is higher or in excess of the input GST that we paid, then the remaining output CGST that we have collected can also be utilized to set off the the balance value of the input CGST. That is what we have done in this case. Right, like see, input CGST was how much? It was 3 lakh, and we had the balancing figure of, we had balance of 2 lakh under the output CGST, but we will be able to adjust to the extent of 3 lakh only. So the balancing figure has been adjusted from the using the IGST, but we will be able to adjust to the extent of 75,000 only, because we only have 75,000 rupee available under the output IGST account. So that means we will be left with a balance of 25,000, which is not yet set off, and the amount which is not yet set off can be claimed from the government, and therefore it is considered as the receivable amount. And once we are done with the treatment of the CGST, we move to the treatment of the setting off of the SGST. And input SGST that we collected, that we paid is 3 lakh, and the amount that we collected only 2 lakh. So that means further the unclaimed, unset off, the amount we were not able to set off can be claimed from the government. Therefore, it is a receivable amount. Tell me everyone if this is clear or not.
Yes, sir.
Now tell me whether you will be able to pass the entry. The first entry will be for what? We first try to utilize the output GST to set off the input IGST, right? So the treatment for this will be output IGST account debit to input IGST account 2,50,000. Is that correct? Right, everyone? You will be able to pass the entry for the question or not?
Yes, sir.
If you want me to pass the entry, I can do that for you. First, let me just tell you orally. The first entry will be, because we are utilizing output GST to the extent of 2,50,000 to set off the input IGST. So the entry for this will be output IGST account debited to input IGST account 2,50,000. After that, we have adjusted CGST to the extent of 2 lakh. Input CGST has been adjusted out of output CGST to the extent of 2 lakh. So the journal entry for this will be output CGST account debit to input CGST account. And the remaining balance which was not set off using the output CGST, we basically set off this amount from the remaining balance of output IGST. So the entry for this will be output IGST account debit, right? Yeah, it will be output SGST account debit to, just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. Output IGST account debit to input CGST account 75,000. And one last entry will be required to show the set off of the SGST, and the entry for that will be output SGST account debit to input SGST account 2 lakh. Tell me if you want me to pass the entry, show you the entries for the same, or whether you will be able to do it on your own or not. Manisha, Ritika, what do you think? You will be able to do this?
Yes, sir.
All right, everyone. So we have a few more
So can you
questions.
just show me for the set of input CGST against remaining output IGST?
Yeah, see, this is the entry. You want me to explain anything? Just let me know.
So can you just explain the set of input CGST against the remaining output IGST?
Yeah, sure. See, I guess the first entry is clear. We will be passing the entry for this. This 2,50,000 has been adjusted with the output GST. So the entry for this is clear now. Output GST account debit to input IGST account. Output IGST account debit to input IGST account 2,50,000. Now after that, we'll pass the entry to show the treatment of this 2 lakh. Output CGST account debited by 2 lakh to input CGST account 2 lakh, right? And the balancing figure that was not that we were not able to set off with the output CGST. We will try to set off this amount with the IGST, but we only have 75,000 balance available under the output IGST account. So the entry for this will be output IGST account has been utilized to the extent of 75,000 debited to set off the CGST account to CGST account 75,000. This will be the entry for this particular thing that we are doing. Tell me if this is clear, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And rest of the entries are clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this will give you some idea how basically set off thing is done. Because we are out of time and I have my next class, so we won't be able to discuss any more question. But you have the PDF available with you. I would recommend that you try solving the questions on your own now. Since you understood the fundamental of this, the very concept of this topic, I think now you will be able to do most of the question of this topic on your own as well. Right, Vanisha? What do you think? Do you think you will be able to do
Yes,
that?
sir.
Okay. So, guys, this is it for today's session. We'll talk. We'll try to discuss one or two more questions based on this concept in the next class as well. All right. Is that clear, everyone? I know you people must be finding this topic a little complicated. Since we are discussing this for the very first time, and yeah, this is little complicated, but you will try. But if you will try a few question on your own, in fact, if you try the same question that I just explained in the class, you will start finding this topic easy. All right, but just to make it more clear, we'll discuss few more questions in the next class as well. All right, everyone. Now, this is it for today's session. We'll discuss few more questions in the next class. Till then, take care.